Brendan, today we are on the hunt for 4 cars with fatal flaws. 4 cars with major design elements that make them extremely expensive and extremely difficult to own. And how are we going to do that?
So we are out at Dealer's Auto Auction of the Rockies, where this is a wholesale lot, and if a dealer has a car that is just too much of a headache and they want to wholesale it out and get rid of it, this is where they end up. So I think this would be a good spot to find at least 4 cars that have major problems.
Yeah, well, we've got several hundred vehicles to kind of peruse through. So let's get looking.
All right, Tommy, I think I have found a good example to start this thing off with. This is none other than the North Star engined Cadillac Eldorado, I think, right?
Yeah, this is a really weird car. This is called the ETC, the Cadillac Etc. But these Cadillacs with the V8 engine from the 1990s through the 2000s have some major fatal flaws. Let's get into those.
Now, hiding under the hood of this Eldorado is the North Star V8, and that name should have you quaking in your boots. When it debuted in 1993, it was a revolutionary engine that GM was really trying to make something advanced in technology. And what they didn't realize they were doing was making something overly complicated and problematic compared to their traditional V8 engines. And they made this all the way through 2011, so there are a lot of vehicles that it comes in, including things with the Oldsmobile brand, with the Buick brand, and the Pontiac brand, as well as Cadillac. Now, one of the things that starts to go on these early on is the water pumps. And when those water pumps go, your engine will overheat.
Yeah, and these engines really don't like to be overheated because the head is attached to the block with something called a TTY bolt, a torque to yield bolt, and that's a bolt that has a tendency to stretch. And when the engine overheats, the bolt stretches and then the head gasket fails. That's just the beginning of the problems though, because there's a lot more we have to talk about.
Now, hopping into these, I will say the interior is really nice. They're pretty comfortable. I mean, yeah, the buttons are pretty chunky and very 90s GM, but the main issue that I want to talk about is oil consumption. And that starts with the rear main seal as well as valve cover gaskets, but that's not the biggest culprit. Let's start it up.
North Star V8s, especially the early ones like this car, have a tendency to burn oil. And that's actually oil getting into the combustion chamber and burning off through the combustion process. Now, carbon buildup builds up in the piston ring grooves. That leads to blow-by, and the net result is, Brendan, blue smoke coming out of the exhaust, oil consumption, bad performance, and poor fuel economy. And it'll never pass emissions, of course.
So we've been filming just for a few minutes, and you can see that this is overheating actively right now, and it's just spraying part of this hot coolant out at you. And the easiest way to tell when you're not under the hood if you've got a coolant leak or an overheating, is on the inside you'll have like kind of a sweet smell from that coolant coming out.
Well, the other thing I'm noticing, Brendan, is that the coolant is super oily, which means that the coolant is mixing with the oil, which usually means the head gasket has gone bad. And clearly, judging by all the white residue all over the engine, that's not the first time this has happened.
Ooh, Tommy, I think I see probably the most problematic car here.
Yeah.
This is the first gen Audi Allroad.
Yeah, great choice, Brendan. So these are cars which I think really moved the needle for the automotive industry. It was kind of an early attempt at like an off-roady crossover, but of course with the silhouette of a wagon, but these have a ton of problems.
Yeah, so Audi wasn't building an SUV at the time when they came out with the Allroad, because this was their answer to the SUV craze by jacking up their wagon. But what they did is they gave it air suspension, and the air suspension on these is notoriously terrible.
The air suspension on these C5 Audi Allroads so unreliable. They have a failure rate of just about 100%, and I'll bet you anything, Brendan, this car has been swapped to coils. Let's find out. So on all four corners of these Allroads from the factory, you'd find this big squishy looking bag, and I bet if I crawl underneath here, that squishy bag has been replaced by a sturdy coil. And sure enough, it has been. So this car is no longer on the air suspension, you know, which is very common nowadays.
So under the hood of the Audi Allroad is their 2.7 liter twin turbo V6. Now this is similar to the engine that you could also find in the S4, which sounds really cool that you have basically a lifted S4 wagon, but it is very problematic.
Which is a shame, Brendan, because it really was a powerful engine in a small package. But let's talk about some of the big issues. Turbos. There are two of them, they fail frequently, and it's a pretty expensive job to get them replaced. What are some of the other issues?
So these also have timing belt and tensioner failures, and if you have to do that job, you essentially have to take off the entire front end of the vehicle just to get access to it.
These also suffer from a number of oil leaks, but it's not just the engine and the suspension that are at fault. The transmission doesn't have a great reputation either, right?
Yeah, they generally fail before you hit 100,000 miles, and I think that that is just too short-lived of a transmission in my opinion.
So overall, the Audi A6 Allroad, good-looking car, surprisingly capable off-road, but just not one we can recommend.
All right, Tommy, I know you are a fan of minis, and so am I, but there is one mini that you should avoid, and it's this guy.
Oh, Brendan, you're killing me, because these are such cute, cool little cars, but they have a ton of problems. So this is the second generation of Mini, and specifically the Cooper S models, the sport models built between 2007 and 2010, have major engine issues. Let's pop the hood and talk about it.
So under the hood of these minis is the N14 engine, and these are notorious for getting carbon buildup on the valve and the intake ports. And on top of that, they have coil pack issues.
Yeah, but that's just the start, because the big issue with the N14, failures with the timing chain and the tensioner, which will take out the engine because it is an interference unit. But we also have problems with the turbo, right, Brendan?
Yeah, so these turbos are very problematic, and it looks like somebody has fastened some wire to hold this one together, but the problems still continue. You have to top off the oil every 500 miles generally on these because they do tend to burn oil, and they go through high pressure fuel pumps, which just the fuel pump alone, which is generally a fairly simple fix, is like a $500 to $600 part.
Yeah, and that right there is a big issue with the turbo. It's the feed line. I mean, the number one way to keep these engines alive, frequent oil changes. The recommendation for Mini was far too long, which led to too many engine failures. And I bet if you start this engine up, it's going to have some issues. You want to give it a go?
Let's do it. All right, so hopping in the Mini, and you know, I have to say I do really like the interior of these. I do like the center mounted gauge cluster, and just the interior, it does feel nice. It feels like a special vehicle to be in. But let's start it up because that's where things start to go south.
Well, clearly you can hear that this poor engine in this Mini is not running properly. It's got a really rough idle, and give it a rev. Oh, and it is smoking black smoke like a chimney. Now these cars, super fun to drive, in good condition, only worth about maybe $5,000 or $6,000, but clearly this thing has some major engine issues. Give it one more rev, Brendan.
All right, Tommy, I got one last one here for you, and that is the Ford Focus.
Ah, yeah, now this is a pretty new car. This is a 2016.
Yeah, but they do have one major fatal flaw, and that is the transmission that is in these.
Now, we're talking about that power shift dual clutch transmission, right? So an automatic transmission that requires no input from the driver to shift, but it's a dual clutch system. And they had these in the Focuses and the Fiestas too, right?
Yeah, they came out in 2011 in the Fiesta, all the way through 2016, and then in 2012 through 2016 in the Focuses. And the problem with these is that they just have such a high failure rate, and so much so that it even resulted in like a class action lawsuit.
Yeah, a lot of owners experienced failures of not only the clutch packs, but also output shafts, that kind of thing. But let's take this for a ride and let's see if we can feel the problem.
Let's do it. Let's fire it up.
So it still befuddles me to this day as to why Ford decided to go with a dual clutch transmission.
It just died. As soon as I put it in gear, it died.
Or you've completely run out of gas.
That could be it. It does say 0 miles to empty. If I press on the throttle, treat it like a carbureted car.
Well, the good news is, Brendan, we've got plenty of power shift transmission equipped Focuses and Fiestas here.
That's true.
Let's try a different one.
Let's find one.
All right, Brendan. We are now in a Fiesta because the Focus has run out of gas.
Yeah. Oh, and this one runs really rough. Yeah, this one's not great either.
Well, let's see how the transmission is because we still have a power shift automatic in this car.
Get
Now, people
my
complain,
safety belt on.
People complain about, stutters and kind of jerking motions in between gear shifts.
Let's see.
Well, it took off okay.
Oh, no, I just felt it slip a little bit there between the 1 and 2.
Yeah, interesting.
The other thing I am noticing on this particular model is that I think the person that owned this was very nervous about their transmission going out because they have completely taken all of the padding off the very top of the steering wheel. It's just nothing but like bare plastic. But yeah, I can tell this one is having that issue.
It's slipping in first gear.
Yeah.
I have a friend that has one of these automatic Fiestas. Bought it brand new. He's gone through 3 clutch packs, all on 5th gear.
Oh my gosh.
Now, the dry dual clutch thing works in race cars. It does not work in cars where you're constantly on and off the gas. Oh, slipping.
Yeah.
Oh, did you feel the clunk? Oh,
yeah.
Brendan.
This one is bad.
So Brendan, as a result of these failures, Ford faced class action lawsuits, not only here in the US, but other parts of the world as well. Did Ford extend the warranty on these transmissions?
Yeah, so rather than doing a proper full-fledged recall on these, they actually just opted to extend the warranty. So on the transmissions themselves, they have a 7-year, 100,000-mile extended warranty. And on the control modules, which is the most likely to go out, they have a 10-year, 150,000-mile warranty.
So this is a 13 Fiesta with 117,000 miles, so it's still under its control module warranty, but there's a catch because so many of those modules fail. Even if you wanted to replace it under the warranty, you likely couldn't because of the demand. Well, there you have it, guys. 4 cars you should probably never buy. This has been Tommy and
Brendan.
And as always, check out alltfl.com for the latest and greatest in new and used car reviews.
Take care, guys.